Well, hey there, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of the show. I am your host, Janine Alley, and you are listening to Becoming the CEO of Your Life. And today we are talking about the secrets and benefits of slow thinking. So if you are brand new to the show, I want to welcome you here today. I help women who are visionaries to develop unwavering conviction and unapologetic self-trust in what you are here to create. And there are three main pillars that support this. The first one is to connect to your inner guide, to be able to connect to your core and the truth and the wisdom and the knowledge that's there. The second piece of this is to learn how to fuel your creative fire so that you really are taking amazing care of yourself so that you have the energy to show up in your life in a way that really lights you up and supports the work that you have to do in the world. And the third piece of this is to really embody your energetically aligned message. And what I mean by that is you're able to really walk the talk. So you are practicing the things that you preach. And I know sometimes in the process of learning and developing, there is a little bit of lag time to the things that we know and the things that we're actually doing. But I feel like to really be in alignment in what it is that you're thinking and believing and doing at the same time. So a lot of this is the stuff that we talk about in the podcast. I just kind of shared the 30,000 foot view with you about the podcast. But today we're talking about slow thinking, and a lot of that has to do with really connecting to that core, that inner wisdom that you have. And in order to do this, this is a slow process of self-discovery. It takes some time. And I'm going to talk about some really good examples today in my life and how I've learned how to do this and how I'm learning how to do this. I think this is probably a lifelong process for all of us, but also not only some examples, but how to do this in your own life. So the reason why I wanted to share this message with you today is I think that we get results we don't like from what we're doing, right? The stress, the frenzy, the fast pace, and of course, the fast thinking that comes from the lifestyle that we live as a culture. And unfortunately, what happens is a lot of times we end up feeling like we're staying really surfacey in what it is that we're creating. We have this desire to go deeper, but we feel like we don't have the time, right? That's really the thing, or I don't even know how to think slowly in order to go deeper on the things that I want to do. And what happens is we're looking for a lot of quick fixes. And I've been guilty of doing this as well, but we're looking for something fast on the outside that we can grab and digest and implement in a really short period of time. However, what I want to try to convince you of today, or just put it out there and let you kind of chew on it for a little bit, is that when we have this core connection, it actually ends up saving us a lot of time because the answers are within ourselves. And when we know how to connect to that, not only do we feel more at peace and more grounded and centered in what we're doing, but we end up cutting down on a lot of work time and a lot of busy time in our lives. And I don't know who doesn't want more of that, right? But I think we crave a more relaxed and calm and connected way of being. And when we are in this state, I feel like we're in the mindset to really leave a legacy, make an impact, and do the things that we want to do in the world. But this requires that we slow ourselves down. And I've talked about slowing down before on the podcast, but I haven't specifically talked about slow thinking. And so that's what this is about today on the show. So to truly connect to the root of who you are and your message that you want to share with the world, you've got to know answers to a few things, right? You want to know, of course, who you are, what you believe, why you believe it, why it's important to you, and how you know it on a really deep level. There really isn't anything surfacey about this. And like I said, we've all been guilty of fast thinking and experiencing the downfalls of fast thinking. And I know for myself, here are some of the pitfalls that I've gotten trapped in as I have been guilty, I guess, of thinking too fast. So I get stuck in the shiny object syndrome. I get distracted. I'm not very focused. Sometimes I make impulse purchases on courses or other things that I'm like, okay, this is going to solve the problem. And I just need to get this and do this thing instead of really slowing myself down and thinking through in a more strategic way. The other piece that I've gotten stuck in is I jump to conclusions, right? I make a snap judgment without weighing evidence or asking hard questions. And then I end up having to put my foot in my mouth a little bit later because I have made the wrong conclusion. Sometimes not putting my foot in my mouth with other people, but at least with myself. And oftentimes we compare what we're hearing to our own paradigm without questioning whether or not what we're thinking or believing is truth, or if it's just our opinion, or even whether or not we like our opinion or agree with our opinion or the thing that we're thinking about at the time, just because that was something that we kind of came to the conclusion to at some point in our life, and we've just kind of ran without questioning and or slowing ourselves down and be like, is this really what I believe? So sometimes that's a really helpful question to ask in my own self-coaching practice is that a thought that I actually believe? And stay really curious about that. But if we're not in this space, if we are thinking quickly, we don't listen thoroughly or take the time to really ponder and digest what we're learning or reading or listening to. And this, of course, is going to be to our detriment, right? We're missing out on really pertinent truths that might not be obvious or well understood by ourselves or by our audience. And if we do understand these concepts, we're able to share them with other people in a way that sets us apart. So it is kind of a way that we can build authority. I'm going to talk a little bit about this later. But we often, if we're moving too fast, we're thinking too fast, we miss out on the opportunities right in front of us. We pass over them too quickly. And it might be something that's really amazing that we're kind of on the right track for. And then we get distracted or sidelined or whoop over here. And we gloss over things too quickly and we don't take the time to really explore and go deep and share our insights with other people. So when we do, however, know how to think slowly, there are some obvious benefits, right? Of course, we're better at problem solving. We want to learn how to make the mental leaps necessary between things that we've previously understood to things that are currently unconnected, whether they're concepts or experience, and being able to bring these things together by adding new knowledge, or like I said, just thinking through things to really connect the dots that might be able to inspire new connections or new aha moments, of course, that we can share with other people. So to really imagine something that you currently don't understand or see, you have to find another way of seeing the problem, of course, right? And this is going to require creativity, and even being in the right mental state to think creatively is a process, right? And this takes some time. It also allows us to think outside of the box. And for me, I know that I have really been able to develop specific character traits that I didn't have before, like patience or compassion, or even mental and emotional stamina to fight against the resistance that comes up anytime I sit down to slow myself down. There's a lot of resistance, like you've got other things to do, right? Or this isn't that important, or you don't have time for this. I mean, there's a lot of things that come up with the resistance, or there's nothing there. Sometimes I sit down to think slowly and it's like, no, nothing there today. So we really want to kind of have this practice of slowing down because of these benefits, but also slowing ourselves down allows us to teach others. If you know the way and you also understand the pitfalls in the path, you're an obvious leader, right? You're an obvious choice for people to kind of gravitate toward if they're struggling with the same things, and allows you to be influential. You need to know how to persuade people, and to a point where people are like, I'll have what she's having. It kind of brings me back to that When Harry Met Sally movie, when the Meg Ryan character, Sally, is faking an orgasm in the restaurant, and the woman next to her, she's like an older woman. She's like, I'll have what she's having, right? So slow thinking allows us to be persuasive. I have a client right now who wants to put in an event center in her community. And in order to do this, you've got to get people on board. It's not like this is a one-man show, right? You want to educate people on the benefits of having an event center in your community. If this is an example of your project, right? I'm just sharing this as an example, but you want to get people excited. You want people to be forward thinking with you and to get them on your side in order to fund the project and make it happen, right? And so in order to to be in that space where you are persuasive and influential, you got to slow yourself down. And like I mentioned briefly just a minute ago, if this is done well, it allows you to be in a place of authority. You've done your homework. People know that you're not just blowing smoke up their skirt. What you have to say holds weight and it is worth listening to. So I've been thinking a lot about this because recently started listening to a new podcast to me. It's a religious-based podcast that talks about religious history. I really enjoy the show because they do a weekly show, but they do it in a series. Like they'll take a topic and they'll do like, I don't know, anywhere between 6 and 12 shows, episodes in a series. And I really, really enjoy listening to them. I mean, not only are they brilliant, both of the men that are hosts on the podcast have PhDs. They really know their stuff. But what makes them really interesting and for me worth tuning into is they go really deep and they're able to stay objective with the facts. They said, this is the way that it is. It could have been this, it could have been this, it could have been this. And they're not really very emotional about the things that they're talking about. Something that I learned on the show about taking historical sources and kind of weighing how reliable is this specific source. And I'm sharing this example so that you can see how they slow down to even weigh a source. And I'm sharing this as an example so that you can do something similar in your own life, not necessarily weighing historical sources, but the process of slowing down. One of the things to consider when weighing the reliability of historical sources is how close the source of the information is to the subject that they're talking about. So, for example, how well does someone know the person that they are sharing a story about? So, if this person was a spouse, if it was a parent or a sibling, these are very close people to a source, right? And they're going to be more reliable than somebody who was a friend of a friend of a friend, right? Not a super reliable source in that way. But also another thing to weigh in as far as understanding the reliability of a historical source is how much time has elapsed since the event has happened. So if somebody was writing a journal entry about something that happened yesterday, that is a pretty reliable source, right? Particularly if they are a spouse, right? Or if it's coming from the person themselves. Of course, that's the most reliable source. This is what happened to me. That's going to be much more weighty than, again, a friend of a friend down the road, right? Or, 30 years has passed from an event that they're trying to remember. That is a really long time that has gone by. And I know for me, time has a way of changing my memories just because, we're human beings and that's what happens. So these are things that to consider. And in order to do this, you've got to move slowly, right? You've got to move slowly through the content that you're studying. You want to also weigh in context. Like, is this something that needs more context to really understand what is being said? So I feel like they have done an amazing job of not only sharing the information, but doing this really well on the podcast. So it's got me thinking about slowing things down and also looking at my own life and thinking about times where this did not go very well and what I could have done better. So I want to just share my very first go at creating a course and teaching some content and what did not go well in the realm of what I talk about on the podcast now, which is conviction and self-trust. And so back in the day, my husband and I've talked about this a lot on the show, but my husband and I changed our diet to a plant-based diet in 2004. And I started teaching plant-based classes in 2007 when we lived on a little tiny Air Force base in northern Japan. So the community was very small, and this plays into my story. So I did not, like I said, have unwavering conviction and self-trust in what it was that I was teaching. I wavered. I was worried that I was going to offend people. I felt insecure. I was feeling like it wasn't really my information to share, even though I had been living this way and I was doing, to be honest, 20 years down the road, I was doing a phenomenal job of living a plant-based life as far as what my diet looked like. But I felt insecure because I felt like it wasn't really my information to share because I wasn't the scientist in the lab who made all the discoveries. I was just the reader of a lot of books, and I downplayed my own knowledge and my own experience because, like I said, I wasn't like the firsthand source of the discoveries. And I did have a fan club on the base because I was teaching these classes. And I mean, to this day, I'm a little surprised how many people started coming out. I had maybe 30 people in the first class. I think I had 26 to be exact in the first class. And I had about 90 people in the last class that I taught. There were live classes. And I taught one every year for 4 years. I may have taught 5, but it wasn't a lot. It was just a handful of people. But this kind of had a ripple effect in the community. It was a small community and word gets around fast. So I had created a lot of haters in the process as well, particularly with the medical staff. And my husband's a dentist, and so he worked in the med group, but I had friends that were taking their kids in to see the doctor, and they would ask them the standard questions on, are you feeding your children well? Are they drinking milk? Are they getting enough protein in? Like all these things. And I was like, well, I'm taking this class from Janine Alley. And as time went on, my name became, I think, more heard about in the doctor's office. And so by the time my turn came around to go to the pediatrician, like, oh, you're the one. That's kind of like that. So that just kind of amped up my insecurity because they disagreed with a lot of things that I was teaching. And that created some backlash and some uncomfortable feelings on my end. So, like I said, I wasn't thinking about developing conviction or self-trust, and I really wish I had developed more of that muscle. However, that's not the way that it worked out, and I probably wouldn't be here talking about this today if I hadn't gone through that experience of it not going well, and that's okay, right? But what I want to just say here is self-trust and conviction is not false bravado. It is not cockiness. I feel like there is room for humility and a softness to what it is that you're doing. You don't want to go in and bulldoze over people. I totally understand that. And that's not what I'm saying. But you want to be bold and you want to be brave and you want to be steadfast. It's an anchored, grounded energy in you, is what it is. You don't have to try and convince other people. You want to just be grounded in the project and understand the more you talk about it, the right people are going to come to you. You might have to do some advertising to find those people, and that's okay. But if you're grounded in the project, if you're grounded in the belief, it does make the process a lot less rocky for you. You kind of have this energy of, oh, are you in? Awesome. Oh, you're not? Also fine too. Right? Who's with me? It's going to be great. And I also want to just say here, you don't have to know everything. I think this sometimes holds us back. You want to be anchored not only in your own education, but you want to be anchored in the experiences that you've had. I can tell you the experiences that I've had eating plant-based it's changed the trajectory of my life. I have way more energy now than I did when I was in my early 20s. And that was kind of the selling point for me when we changed over. I was probably, I don't know, mid 20s probably. And I had more energy, way more energy than I did when I was in college or even in high school when I started feeding myself well. So I didn't have that as something that was like a huge factor or a huge piece of my belief in what it is that I was doing. I felt like, yeah, from the science and when I'm learning, this makes sense with what I know from my science background. But I wasn't kind of taking into consideration all of the things, all of my experience as something that I could anchor myself in and share with other people. So you want to do the work to really slow yourself down when you're thinking about what makes you different and why you believe the things that you believe, why you're sharing them with other people to help you to stay grounded and not feel like you're haphazard in the way that you're showing up and the way that you're sharing your message. Okay. Another example of this that I feel like, oh, this was a great, great learning experience for me was a couple years ago, I was creating a new course or a new experience, I should say. And I was kind of bringing in all the things that I had learned up until this point. So I had homeschooled my kids, 4 kids. I was an efficiency expert in knowing how to do that and then build my business at the same time and eat plant-based and train for half iron triathlons and staying organized and, creating an environment where I could really thrive and flourish. And I had created a course that kind of showcased this experience so other people could, take what they needed and get good results from it. So I was speaking to a lot of things, and I had a marketing expert come in and take a look at my stuff. And he just said, he's like, "You're not selling any of this, are you?" I was like, "Well, no. Not yet," but he's like, "I would recommend you just speaking to one of these things." And so at that point, I made a pivot in my business to just focus on productivity because I felt like if you could make the time for the things that matter to you, then the other pieces would fall into place, right? The health and the organization and, all the other things that I was talking about. However, at this point in the game, I have learned a lot about messaging. I've learned a lot about marketing. And I feel like that wasn't necessarily the problem. I feel like I could have spoken, is that the right word? I could have spoken to what it was that I was trying to help people to do and to get them to see the outcomes that they would have working with a coach like me, like with my background. And so what I'm saying here is sometimes we get advice from well-intentioned people. This is, again, relying on those external resources instead of tuning in to ourselves and finding that message and finding what makes us unique and really running with it. And that takes conviction. It takes self-trust. It takes slowing down and thinking slowly about, okay, how do I want to piece this together? Is this really true that I need to change what it is I'm talking about? Or does it mean that I just need to change how I'm talking about it? Those are two different things. And again, that requires slow thinking. So it's interesting because I did do the productivity piece for a long time. I still did Burnout Breakthrough. I was working with people doing that. But now I'm kind of back in the space of kind of encompassing a lot more of what I feel like makes me unique as a coach and bringing my past and my history and my education forward to really help people where they're at and the things that they need. Okay, so those are some of my examples. So how do you do the work to really think slowly and deeply? So the first thing that you need to do is you need to build your awareness muscles. You want to understand the difference between, of course, beliefs and facts. And the hard thing with this is when we believe it, it feels true, right? So that's part of it. But you also want to understand that sometimes facts are even fallible. You see this all the time in science, right? Things that I learned in college 25 years ago are things that we don't learn anymore because it's outdated. We've learned other things that kind of trump the way that we were making sense of the world, just from a scientific lens. You have to be aware also of your layers of belief. The way that I kind of think about it is I have thoughts. There are things that I think, right? And then there's things that I believe, and then there's things that I know. It's really good for me to get clear on how I think these things, why I believe these things, and how I know what it is that I know, because this helps me to kind of anchor, do I still believe this? Is this something that I know, or do I just have a really strong opinion about this? And a lot of times they're opinions, but they're things that I really do believe because I've done the work. So you want to kind of also identify these kinds of layers and slow yourself down that way to get the depth that you want on your belief and your knowledge. Okay, the second piece is you want to create a practice. So you want to set the time aside to think, to get quiet. And a couple of weeks ago, I did a podcast on getting quiet and the power of stillness and what that looks like. So you can go back and listen to that episode if you want to, but you want to work up the stamina to think about something for a while. So for me, this means usually that I'm writing something down. If I just kind of leave my brain up to its own devices, it's kind of here, there, and everywhere. So I really like to write down my thoughts. I even write down my questions. And I have learned to ask really good questions. This is something that I want to encourage you to do. So let me give you some examples of some really good questions. So an example of a good question would be, is this true for me? What else could be true? What are other possibilities? Do I like this? Do I want to do this? And if yes, what do I want it to look like? So if I want to run my own business, do I want to be working 80 hours a week? It's possible, but I don't want to do that. I only want to be working 20 hours a week. So what does that look like? How can I run a successful business and still be working 20 hours a week? What am I not willing to give up? And how do I want to show up in my life and in my business and the thing that I'm working on? These are really powerful questions to ask and to think about. Some other questions that I've asked before and shared before on the podcast, when we're talking about, working on a project and having something not go well, you have to learn how to, like I said, solve these problems and to be creative in the solutions process. And these three questions have really served me well. What's going on? What's not working? And how can I do this better? And just understand it's all an experiment. That is what visionary life is. It's just all one big fat experiment. So you want to be able to stay objective in what it is that you're doing, not take things personally, not get really discouraged, because you're going to get there. It just takes some time, right? So take your time to really write down the answers to your questions as well, and give yourself permission to change your mind. Now, not all of these questions, of course, are going to apply to every situation. So you want to use definitely your own ideas and ways to ask these kinds of questions if you're using the list that I just shared. But lastly, the way that we learn how to think slowly is to really experience life and to really put ourselves out there. That is going to be such a great teacher, right? New museums or places that you don't normally go, taking a class or getting certified to do something new. Traveling, of course, is just so eye-opening for so many different reasons. Sensory experiences, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, like skydiving or ziplining. These things can really add rich context to life. Even reading books that are outside of your comfort zone or your comfort genre, I should say, really kind of add a new flavor of life and a way to think deeply about other people's points of view, as well as kind of weighing in your point of view. And are you going to move forward with this belief or not? And all the things that you want to get really clear on in order to move forward with the vision. So I want to say one thing here about experience with this, because there was a point in my life where I'm like, you know what? I get a better vision and picture of the Mona Lisa by looking at it in a book than going to the museum, because I was really frustrated taking my little kids to the Louvre when we lived in Europe. We took a trip to Paris. I went to the Louvre and wanted to see the Mona Lisa. There were a few things in that museum that I really wanted to see. And the Mona Lisa, I got into the room with the Mona Lisa. It is a tiny painting. It is so small and it's behind all this glass. And of course, 17 rows of tourists. And it's true, I can see the Mona Lisa better in a book, but I wouldn't have the experience of being with the crowds and seeing how tiny it is and making my way through the Louvre, which felt like a small town in itself. But all of that created a story and it created context to life and just a different experience than reading something out of a book. So I just want to throw that out there as a way to think slowly about things and gaining experience and applying that experience to new thoughts and ideas that are coming up for you. So that's it. That's what I have for you today. If you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, I would love it if you shared it with friends and family and all over the socials. I would also love it if you left me a rating and reviewed the podcast. That helps other people to find the podcast as well. And lastly, before you go today, if you've not booked your Unwavering Woman assessment, I would love to talk to you. So this is a way for you to get a ton of value and to understand how you're wavering. You're going to walk away with action steps to deepen your conviction and who you are and what you're doing to help you show up with more self-trust and to keep going on the project, on the vision that you have to make the world a better place. So if that sounds like a good fit for you, just go over to JanineAlley.com/CEO, hop on my calendar, and we will do your Unwavering Woman assessment over there. So super exciting. All right, you guys, that is what I have for you guys today. I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day. We'll talk to you soon. See ya.